The day I found a wedding shower set up in my backyard pool was the day I learned how thin the line is between community and control. It was a Saturday. I'd gone out for coffee, came home to pastel chairs, a floral arch leaning over my deck, and a photographer with a lens pointed straight at my pool like it owned the place. I stood on my porch for a long minute, watching ribbon flutter and bridesmaids fuss, and I thought, somebody's really confused about whose yard this is. My name's Sam Harlow. I've lived on Oakview Lane for 7 years. I keep the yard tended, I greet the mail carrier, and I try not to be that neighbor. Except, apparently, when Evelyn Price decides she needs a backdrop for her community events. Evelyn runs the HOA social secretary, unofficial mayor, the kind of woman whose smile sharpens when she gets attention. She's polished, meticulous, and loves a good photo op. She also has this idea that the neighborhood exists for her to stage manage, and property lines are just suggestions if a good Instagram moment is on the table. I'm not the loud type. I'm not a guy who storms about with a bullhorn. But when the bridesmaids offered me a mimosa and asked if I'd mind sharing the pool for a few hours, I remember how my chest tightened. Not because of the pool, but because that tiny, polite question was a power play wrapped in cotton candy. It was Evelyn's handiwork. She'd called favors, found chairs, and RSVP'd the neighborhood in my name. The guests thought it was generosity. I thought, someone is weaponizing charm. So what do you do in that split second? You could get angry. You could call the cops. You could make a scene and end up the villain in a dozen blurry photos. I paced, then I sat down by the pool with my hands on my knees. I thought about reputation, mine, theirs, the HOA's, and how social proof works. One faux pas, and I'd be rude homeowner with a mean streak. That's what Evelyn wanted, a reaction that made her look like the reasonable one. I decided not to give her that. Instead, I called a friend, Luis, who runs a pool service and has the patience of a saint. I told him, make it look different, subtle, nothing dangerous. He came over, mumbling about algaseed and filters, and in 20 minutes the water had this odd, almost cinematic depth to it, a soft, impossible blue, like somebody had left a filter on the world. The photos taken that afternoon looked amazing at first glance, but when the photographer downloaded them, something off happened. Skin tones went weird, dresses looked like candy in a fisheye, and every pastel shifted into this electric, unpurchasable blue. Word spread quickly. A few guests laughed it off. The bride was embarrassed. Designers hate color issues. Evelyn was furious. She tried to frame it as sabotage. Someone ruined our event, she kept saying, with that authoritative bite. She posted in the HOA group, unprofessional behavior in a communal space. People replied with sympathy, until neighbors started posting their own photos of my casual Sunday barbecue from last month, the ones that showed me opening the gate for elderly Mrs. Kemp, the ones where I'd fixed a neighbor's fence. Social proof can be a weapon too. I won't pretend I didn't enjoy that small victory. There's a stiffness that leaves your shoulders when you reverse the narrative. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about a principle that you don't appropriate people's lives to stage your own. Evelyn's motive wasn't purely vanity. Though that was big, it was control. She believed the neighborhood was an audience, and she was the director. The HOA gave her a little authority, and she turned it into a platform. She escalated. A notice arrived in my mailbox a few days later, formal and legal sounding. Unauthorized use of amenity. Fine pending review. The letter had her signature neat, practiced. She'd learned that if paperwork looks official, people assume it is. I asked her to produce the bylaw that gave the HOA jurisdiction over a private backyard. Crickets. She sent follow-ups with thicker fonts. I started collecting evidence, property deeds, emails, timestamps from security cameras. I printed things and stapled them into a neat folder like a courtroom clerk. I prepared, because escalation is best met with facts, not fury. The neighborhood, by then, had picked a side quietly. People like things simple. Heroes and villains. But when everything is messy, they look for proof. At the HOA meeting, Evelyn stood up in her navy blazer and read a list of grievances. Dramatic pauses, everyone nodding in the right places, and when she finished, she smiled like she'd handed down judgment. Then I stood. I had my folder. I didn't shout. I didn't laugh. I simply walked up, set the stack on the table, and told the room what the documents showed. That the pool was private, that the HOA's authority didn't extend to private property, that a pattern of staged events had been organized for vanity, not community. What matters in that moment, the thing I learned and wish I'd known sooner, is tone. Say truth plainly, and people listen. Say it with disgust, and you're just two people yelling. I laid out the timeline. Calls, texts, the photographer's timestamps. I showed photos of Evelyn coordinating with vendors while the bride smiled, oblivious. The room watched. Faces shifted. It wasn't dramatic, but it was decisive. Social currency turned. People start imagining themselves in your shoes. That imagination is where judgment lives. Evelyn tried to push back with a smear campaign, online comments, a concerned resident's post, suggestive innuendo about my temperament. She tried to marshal the HOA's bylaws into a cudgel. But the more she pushed, the more transparent her motives looked. Her supporters dwindled. Some neighbors privately messaged me, stories of petty fines and late-night doorbell confrontations, small cruelties that added up. Power can be invisible until it's consistent. The turning point came at the summer block party. I decided to host something intentionally ordinary. Burgers, a cooler of beer, acoustic guitar in the corner. Nothing staged, nothing curated. I invited the neighborhood explicitly, publicly, and I included a small fundraiser for the local animal shelter. People showed up with folding chairs and kids and dogs. They brought potato salad and stories. Evelyn tried to set up a separate, elegant area with string lights and white linens, as if competing for aesthetics could reclaim authority. She arrived wearing the same smile, but it was thin. I didn't lock her out. I greeted her at the gate. I offered her a plate with a frank smile and a glass of punch. She took it, and for a few minutes, she looked like any other neighbor. Then, as the sun dipped, 100 candid photos started being taken. A kid face first into a cupcake, a retired teacher strumming a guitar off-key, neighbors laughing so hard one of them nearly toppled into the pool. Those photos, messy, warm, human, spread through the group chat faster than anything staged. The internet likes mess when it's honest. Evelyn's curated moments felt smaller in comparison. For the finale, not my finest moment of righteousness, but perhaps the most cinematic, I organized what people later called the Blue Bash. It was a private invite, intentionally small, for folks who'd been dragged into the drama or who'd offered help. Bubble machines, cheap floats, an eclectic playlist, and a charcoal grill. Evelyn had wanted flash and control. I wanted joy and mess. She came by, late, in a dress that screamed polished, and for a beat, she tried to orchestrate an interventionist speech about maintaining standards. She was met with a chorus of unimpressed faces and the sound of a speaker playing something that made you want to dance badly. Someone turned up the bubbles at exactly the wrong moment, and the entire setup for her rival reception, the white linens, the carefully arranged forks, looked ridiculous beneath a shower of iridescent foam. Humiliation is a delicate thing. I didn't plan for anyone to be humiliated. It just happened because authenticity has this inconvenient tendency to overpower artifice. Evelyn left with her collar pinned slightly askew and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She sent one last formal letter requesting a policy meeting. The HOA tabled the motion, citing community consensus. The neighborhood had decided not by decree, but by thousands of tiny choices that stage control wasn't their idea of community. I walked away from that summer having learned something heavy. Justice doesn't always look like the movies. Sometimes it's a folder of timestamps. Sometimes it's a list of receipts. Sometimes it's showing up with potato salad and letting the rest untangle itself. Most of all, I learned I'm not as patient as I like to think, and patience is not always virtue. Sometimes it's an action that enables harm. People have asked me if I regret it, the blue water, the social chess. The answer is complicated. I regret the way it escalated, the private letters that made neighbors choose sides, the petty barbs that cut more because they were personal. I don't regret standing up for a simple boundary. Your yard is your yard. You can be generous without making yourself the director of other people's lives. So I'll leave you with this. How do we define community? Is it the person with the nicest decorations who tells everyone how to behave, or the messy, loud, imperfect group that shows up when someone needs help? And when someone in a position of small power starts to abuse that power for attention, what do you do? Do you confront? Do you ignore? Do you document? Tell me what you would have done. Drop your thoughts below. Was I right to push back? Was Evelyn just trying to create something pretty and I overreacted? Tell me a time your neighborhood turned on someone, or when a neighbor did right by you. I read everything. And I want to know how you think about fairness, control, and what community really means. If you like this story, share it with someone who loves neighborhood drama or someone who hates it, because that conversation matters.